coming on the show today, my man. I really appreciate you coming. Today I'd just like to have a conversation about kind of our history together. What this has looked like, and quite frankly, your past in the space, what you have done, what you've accomplished, what recovery means to you, just more or less, just have a good conversation together about all this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sound good?
Yeah.
So first, I just want to say, Stillwater, top 10 location in the United States, I believe, correct?
For certain things.
For certain things, like what?
I think USA Today just voted it one of the top 10 cities for culinary
arts?
Yeah, like food and stuff,
Yeah.
with populations under a certain size.
Okay.
So yeah, there is a thriving restaurant scene in town. They've done a lot with making it bike and pedestrian friendly.
Mm-hmm.
You and I both share time up in Duluth, Minnesota.
Correct.
It's the biggest small town you'll ever live in.
26 miles long.
Yeah. And you either know the people next to you in the restaurant or you've got mutual friends. But when we moved down here in 2014, we wanted a place that felt similar to Duluth in that it felt there was a sense of community there. And just for a number of reasons, Stillwater seemed like it was about as close as we could get, from the hill to the lift bridge to some water there.
So were you born in Stillwater? In Duluth?
No. So backing up, I was born in Little Falls, Minnesota, central Minnesota, hometown.
Okay.
Of Charles Lindbergh, Falls Plows, small boat capital of the world at one point in time.
Sure is.
And it was if we want to jump right into it, it was a great childhood. My dad was a school teacher, same district his entire life. Knew everybody in town. My mom was a nurse in the emergency room, so between the two of them, they knew everybody.
But brothers or sisters?
I have a sister that's 2 years older than me. She lives over in Hudson, actually. We don't see each other as often as we'd like to. But, she was a very accomplished musician and spent a lot of her time in high school kind of pursuing the fine arts. And to this day, that's kind of still what she does. She's a professional musician, among other things, and does some lessons, does some touring.
Well, that's impressive.
Yeah. It's, I think for people that are able to find that passion and eke out some sort of living from it, they're lucky. I mean, I think, you and I were talking about that earlier today, about how when you just really love what it is that you're doing, the old adage says, like, you never have to go to work. Yeah.
No, it's 5 years for me. Very fortunate, very lucky. I get the opportunity to do what I get to do every day. It's, like I said, I'm very passionate and, quite frankly, privileged to get the opportunity to do what I get to do every day. We take individuals from, truly the throes of addiction, sometimes the most acute level, sometimes less acute level, mental health needs, whatever that looks like, and really get like I said, the privilege to work with folks to see a better life, to see their recovery through. So like I said, we're lucky, and I'm personally very lucky.
I've been working in the business for a while, and I hear that from a lot of people, and I think it can begin to be a talking point maybe. Yeah. But like just knowing you and knowing your heart, and when we first met back in 2014, just kind of hearing a little bit about why you were interested in working where we worked. Can we say the name?
That's fine.
Okay, yeah. When we were both working at Hazelden up in Center City, just kind of hearing your story, how you ended up there, and kind of what you were excited and passionate about.
Napkin and a dream.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense. I think the danger with this business is a lot of people think that it's just a cash machine. One thing I appreciate about Hazelden was when they would say the science of this is kind of balancing mission and margin. We can't do everything for free. But yet we need to make things so they're accessible, and that's something that you guys have done really, really well here at Northstar. Is you've figured out what's your role, what variable can you plug into when trying to solve this equation of complicated addiction, mental health issues, the whole gamut, and you guys have just done a really good job. And again, I've heard a lot of people talk about housing and skill development and all these parts that need to be addressed when somebody is highly acute, out of options, doesn't have much choice left in their life. And you guys have brought that into your programming, and you brought that into your programming sometimes at your cost. But it's because you realize that impacts what the recovery rates are.
Correct.
Other people look at those things as other ways that they can kind of eke out the next nickel from a payer. But it's places can look the same from the outside, and people can develop interesting marketing material. But to get to know somebody's heart is where you really understand what their motives are. And I can honestly say that from you and people that have met working with you. Noble intentions, and it's just been really cool to watch this whole thing unfold.
Well, thanks, Ben. I appreciate that tremendously. And let's flip the side of the coin here. When I had the opportunity to open up and to talk about a couple of these ideas, for 6 years now, Ben, you've basically been my litmus test for every conversation going forward, right? Whether it's opening a women's program, opening an intensive outpatient program, getting into sober living, doing this, doing that, whatever it looks like. My conversation has been spearheaded, most importantly, by you, right? And, no doubt about it, we've had to pay, and I'm stealing this from Chuck Runyon, the learning tax every step of the way, right? But the reality is, if you have your quote unquote, no pun intended, North Star of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish, and back to the mission margin, and you keep your mission in line, right? And our mission is just simply, as an overall corporation, help solve some of society's toughest problems. And if you use that with your decision making, and you like, let's call it, think less about the bottom line and more about the purpose that you're trying to accomplish, the other one works. Right, the former works, and if you just keep that in mind, you keep that in line, and again, helping more individuals, supporting more folks, like doing this podcast today. My hope is, we only have the opportunity to serve, let's call it, total 150 people in our residential programs and outpatient programs currently as it stands. And if this message can hit one more individual, or 10 more individuals, or 1,000 more people from your story that we're going to talk about today, I believe that's admirable. And I believe that that's admirable to help more families, more folks, educate, destigmatize. Like I said, there might be somebody, in Ben Birch's shoes 20 years ago that can resonate with this same or similar maybe feelings, addiction, mental health issue, whatever that looks like for that particular individual. And they can maybe reach out to have that one phone call that they otherwise wouldn't, say, I need some help. So that's my goal, ultimately, from not only the podcast, but, from the work itself. Like I said, I hear it too, right? I'm very privileged. I'm lucky. I'm fortunate. I'm this and this and this. And you can start seeing through some of the bullshit real fast and real quick in this space, in this industry. And, I think that there's this moral compass of, group of individuals in Minnesota that I look to help kind of lead the charge. And I want to be a part of that. And I hope that, individuals in this space, recognize that as well. So.
Yeah, I think anybody that isn't aware of what you've done here and how you're doing it, they will be at some point, because what I like about Northstar is you're not out there constantly looking for the accolades and constantly looking for the recognition and patting yourselves on the back. You're just putting your nose down, and every once in a while I see something in the paper about an award, or I see a new facility opening. you guys are making that impact, and I think all of a sudden, like our friend Dan Cole likes to say, objects in your rear view mirror,
The common man, baby.
and not that size is a measure of success, but it is one thing that people will take notice of is when programs grow and are successful, and you're a smart guy, and I think there's a lot that people can learn about the right way to do this, and maybe some ways that don't work as well.
Yeah, no, but thank you. All right, let's revert back, right?
Sure.
So this is about you. Little Falls, right? Born and raised Little Falls. When did you start, quote unquote, using?
Sure.
Just take me through, maybe, your journey in, addiction as a whole.
Sure. Yeah. I'll try to give the quick version of it because I do like to get into the details, probably too much at times. But I think my age of first use was probably around 15. And they say that statistically
what substance?
It was alcohol. I grew up in a community that really normalized alcohol use. There wasn't a lot of alcohol was readily available within the small rural community that I grew up. In my house, not so much. I never saw my dad drink until I was out of the house. I can vaguely remember my mom having a glass of wine or two. But, fundamentally, it was just something that wasn't condoned.
And your sister?
Same deal. Same deal. Yeah. I think. Yeah. So there was very little disciplinary problems, very little, from the outside, like just very quote unquote normal, but I remember there was just this fascination surrounding alcohol with me. I don't know. It just seemed like there was a lot of social activities that kind of revolved around it. And frankly, I was looking for that first drink, but man, it felt great and I had a lot of fun. And most of my memories throughout high school and college, it was the good stuff. It was that adolescent brain that doesn't necessarily remember or recall the problems, but just looks at how is this working for me? And for the most part,
did it start affecting your grades or your education?
I think
through high school and or college.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know. It's the whole chicken or the egg conversation. I had a history of starting things, but never really finishing them, and I remember that early on, drinking gave me an excuse to not be successful. So if I was drinking and it was a Saturday and we were out in the boat and I couldn't ski very well, I couldn't ski as well as my friends, water ski, well, it's because I'm drinking. I had an excuse, right? And so, I mean, I could say that I think it did affect things from the standpoint of it provided me an outlet to not work as hard and to settle.
Because there was that excuse.
Because there was that excuse. There was that excuse. There was always I could do better if I didn't want to drink today. I could have done better on that test if I would have spent my Friday in studying and not, out with my buddies. Not to say that I was a bad student. I was a good student, but I probably could have done better. I was always never really wanting to give it the next level of effort. I did really well with minimal effort in most of the things that I attempted.
Can I ask,
yeah.
what was it? Were you scared of maybe giving it 100% instead of 80?
I think I was scared of failing. I think I was scared of. It's kind of like that.
Because what I look at is this, right?
Yeah.
You have children right now that are probably active in sports, right? And so what I look at it as almost as the comparable is a let's call it an individual, an athlete that's excelling at a high level, but they truly will never give it 110% on the court, on the floor, on the lacrosse field, whatever you want to say, because of the fear of failure, right? So it's like, if I give it all I got and I don't excel, then I know that like it's all out there. But if I lollygag, or if I give it 85% or give it 90% and I'm just about as good as everybody else, then I know I fit the general group, right? And so, I always kind of use that comparable for all intents and purposes a little bit with failure, and failure of, with alcohol specifically in regards to whether it's education, whether it's marriage, whether it's relationships, whatever that looks like. Because if I always have that to fall back onto, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably is fear of failure. I never tried to quit drinking until the first time I tried to quit drinking, because I didn't want to confirm that suspicion I had.
And what age are we about right now?
Oh, that would have been in my 30s, right?
Okay, yeah.
But I think that belief that I am not good enough, I'm not as good as, was always there with me. Mm-hmm. And for me to try my hardest and to have a goal of getting an A in a class or something, and then not getting it, now I'm confirming that part that I think, but I don't really know. And so going back to the just to the lifestyle, right? I can say that by being more interested in partying, being with your buddies, that kind of thing, you end up having some rationalization of why you're not the 4.0 student. Yeah, I would have loved to have been a 4.0 student.
Alcohol got in the way.
Yeah, I think alcohol got in the way. I think low self-esteem gets in the way. I think there's a lot of these things that are all kind of wrapped up in each other.
So, take me to the point where you believe, like, maybe addiction was escalating.
Sure, yeah. Like there's that old saying, like, I used to be able to choose when I started and stopped, and then I got to the point where I could choose when I started, but couldn't choose when I stopped. And then I got to the point where I couldn't choose when I started and when I stopped. And I think that hit me during grad school. I mean, I was always a blackout drinker from the day that I really started drinking outside of the home in college. If I cracked that first beer, I was going until I passed out, blacked out, etc. But a lot of that behavior is normalized in college because everybody else, you believe everybody else is doing it, or the people that you end up surrounding yourself with are doing it like that, so it doesn't seem so out of the ordinary. But, when I was married and I would find myself waking up on the kitchen floor with the oven at 450 degrees and the front
pizza burns.
Yeah, when the front door of the house wide open, and I'm quote unquote an adult, you start to wonder, like, man, what's really going on here? I think for me, so it was that point where people get out of college and they're able to move on to the next thing.
And you had made mention about being married. Were you married pretty young?
No, it was we just celebrated 20 years, so 1999. Yeah. So,
well, congratulations too.
Yeah, thank you. It's been her story is just as probably more so than mine in terms of just like being able to persevere. But I think people get out of college, they're able to turn the page and move into more responsible living. They're able to go have a couple of cocktails at happy hour and then go home, mow the lawn.
First employment, first job.
Yeah. And, I just lived that sort of lifestyle on the outside, but what was different between me and the people that I was out for happy hour with after work is that when I got home, I had to, quote unquote, finish the job. Those people got home, they probably moved on to other things in their night. I got home, I had to continue drinking. I had to continue drinking. I had to continue to the point where I blacked out or passed out. And so as long as I didn't start, well, then I wouldn't finish, So those were safe. But it got to be more difficult to not pick up that first drink of the day. And I remember when my wife was pregnant with our first child, she said, why don't we both quit drinking together?
So is your wife in recovery too, or no?
She would say works a program of Al-Anon.
Gotcha.
So she can, she can drink like a normal person. She doesn't miss Christmas when she starts drinking in August.
Yeah.
You know, but and I just remember thinking, I mean, the thought of that scared me to death. And then also the thought of not being able to actually do it and having all the tension. So I think alcohol, my use of alcohol was causing a lot of problems in our marriage, but I did a really good job of...
Did you hide it?
Just hiding the problem. We go see the counselor. I mean, I have Mars and Venus. I could quote the book chapter and verse. And, you know, I would work really hard to keep the drinking off the table, you know. And it came up to the point where I was a stay-at-home dad with our first child, and they talk about the obsession. And this is the part that most people that aren't addicts don't understand, is that there is this incredible white noise in your mind that takes up
so much space,
all your energy. It takes up all your energy. And I remember...
So it's almost like damn near anxiety.
It's like exactly. And you can only feel the relief when you give into it. And then once you give into it, the phenomenon craving kicks in, and then, you know, you're off to the races. But I remember like just wanting to get up every day and wanting to get through a shower without thinking about getting drunk or getting high that day. And then I would start playing the mind games of, well, geez, I just have 3 or 4 beers left in the fridge. If I drink those, I won't be thinking about it anymore today. So I would drink those as soon as my wife would leave for work. I'm home with a little baby, and now I've got to go get more, because now I'm thinking, well, my God, it's 9:30. I just canned 4 beers. She's not going to be home till 5. I mean, I can get, you know, another 12 in me. So then it's getting more. You're coming home, you're drinking, you're trying to hide it once your spouse gets there. There's a lot of shenanigans taking place. There's a lot of beginning to isolate because you don't want to get asked the questions, you know? So you end up isolating, becoming a lot more reserved emotionally, physically. And yeah, so I think, you know, that is really where I knew I was screwed, was when I could not get through a shower in the morning without having that that thought hijack, you
Just
know,
race
my
through your
entire
brain.
my entire day, to the point where
did you deal with like anxiety or let me ask it a different way, and I hope you don't mind with this just being very, very straightforward. Have you been diagnosed with any mental health diagnoses?
Yeah, I think the dually disordered, the mental health aspect of all of this, I believe, is underplayed. I think it's way more significant than we realize. But it complicates everything. So that's why we kind of compartmentalize it and minimize it. Because if you really factor that in, it makes this incredibly complicated in many ways. But
or some people, like what I've always been told is, I just outdrink my symptoms.
Sure, absolutely,
Right?
absolutely. So there were a couple things. So my family, we have a history of depression, anxiety. You know, I've come to believe a lot of things are more PTSD-like symptoms than clinical depression or clinical anxiety. But I think just the whole you know, in my case, you know, being a sensitive child in a normal household can be traumatic in some ways, right? But actually... can
I give you an example of last night?
Yeah.
So I have my 7-year-old, and we're at football, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't talk about the touchdown you ran. We didn't talk about the juke move that you had that looked like frickin' Tyreek Hill out there. We didn't talk about the arm that, you know, you threw that awesome pass to, 84 Moss out there. But what we did talk about was how you lost your flags and people laughed at you. And he was damn near traumatized by it. And so back to like the sensitive child thing, like I see it. I see it with the one I have, and I'm telling you, like, it's taking up his fucking brain space every minute of the day. Like, it's not the awesome time at the Children's Museum. It's the one kid that jumped in front of me, but got in front of the goddamn slide before I did.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, and I can think back, like, just a slideshow in my brain of examples of that. You know, examples where I felt maybe humiliated, scared, afraid. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't that it was a horrific childhood. It's just,
where your mind goes versus somebody else.
Yeah.
It's just very different.
So my mental health issues actually were very much. I had a nurse practitioner that did an excellent job asking me about a refill I was getting, because I was getting treated for some depression. Mm-hmm. And she asked me if I would be interested in doing a sleep study. And I was like, wow, man, that sounds, I've got 2 kids at home now, and you're saying I can come to the hospital and actually get a full night's sleep? Like, yeah, let's do it.
It's a superpower, sleep.
Yeah, so I went, and through that experience was diagnosed with narcolepsy.
Jesus.
Okay? So... Which when I spoke to my mom about it, who's a nurse, she's like, yeah, your grandmother had that. So there might be some like hereditary component there. Mm-hmm. When I started being treated for that narcolepsy, so many other things started to fall into place. And so for me, the other diagnosis I believe that I have is this ADHD. Mm-hmm. And I think ADHD in adults comes out as just relationship issues, because the thing about alcohol is that it allowed me to be present, and that's the number one. That's the area that my wife and I are going to fight the most, is my ability to be present even to this day. But when I drank, there was a sweet spot where it calmed my brain down, and I didn't care what time we got somewhere. I didn't care what time we left. I wasn't dicking around with my phone. I could be absolutely in the moment as long as I was drinking. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I believe that to this day was the self-medicative process. Okay. Unfortunately, give a little alcohol to someone has narcolepsy, and I'm passing out at 9:30 at night, in my in-laws' kitchen. But that's just I again could blame it on the alcohol. Mm-hmm. So I think the ADHD and the narcolepsy, to me, really those diagnoses make sense. So
ADHD. Give me an example how it presents itself today.
Today,
right? Like obviously sober Ben, right? In recovery, life of recovery. But ADHD. If you read a book, and your mind goes somewhere for a little bit, does page 1 not exist? Like you have to go back and read it?
No, I think where it presents itself today is going to be. Hang on, I had a great example a second ago. Where it presents itself today is is loss of tolerance. Okay, my tolerations fall way off, and I'm quick to snap at my kids. I'm quick to get irritated with my wife. I just don't have the capacity to interact with the people that are close to me. Mm-hmm. And it's not so much, squirrel, bright light, this thing or that thing. I'm very good at having attention to detail, but I will begin to get frustrated easily. And also, I think anxiety will build because I will begin to maybe ruminate, or obsess is a strong word, but will begin to concern myself overly with something that maybe doesn't need to have that much attention.
Got it.
It could be the way my wife said something, or it could be the way that the neighbor pulled in to their driveway, right? But the wonderful thing about recovery is, if I keep my side of the street clean,
it seems a little OCD.
Well, yeah, but again, I think like that goes hand in glove with addiction. I think people with addiction are going to tend towards that obsessive compulsive part of their brain. It might not be full on like the hand washing type of thing that we normally associate with obsessive compulsiveness, but it certainly is a brain that'll lock on to something. My ADHD and probably the OCD part of it will also begin to micromanage. I think that's another thing. Like when I start to feel that parts of my life are trending out of control, I will get on my kids about picking up the house. I'll get on my wife about just trivial things that don't need the attention that I'm bringing to them. I've got some awareness now, and I think that's wonderful. But as it's been pointed out to me, information does not necessarily provide the transformation. But I think it's a step in the right direction, and the tools of recovery allow me to go back and clean up the mess. After I make it.
When you talk about ADHD, and this transition or phase rather of the medication management with our younger population. I mean, as early as 5, 6, 7, 8, Ritalin, et cetera. Do you believe like that would have helped back in the day? Like, I mean, again, we're talking years ago. I understand that, but I'm just you had made mention about your children.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so I just look and say, do you think that is an answer for how we handle some situations? Don't get me wrong. There's a 1 in 10 spectrum here. I totally understand that. But we're seeing the 2s and 3s on the spectrum be medicated for ADHD today.
Right. I think I think it's similar to Suboxone, right? Mm-hmm. It's not the answer. It can be part of the answer. There's always and. So for me, I don't know. I think there was such a social element of my alcohol use early on that if I had been diagnosed with this, how would that have changed things? So I don't think it would have changed my use patterns. It could have. I don't think it would have changed. That's a great question, Luke. I don't think it would have changed my use patterns. Would it have helped with some esteem issues I dealt with? Maybe. Would it have would it have affected some relationship issues?
Potentially.
Possibly. But I think there is
probably focus.
Absolutely. But it wasn't like I ever came across as a jumpy, rammy, kind of that
neurotic sense.
Yeah,
I don't want to use that word negative.
Yeah, that stereotypical ADHD. I interviewed a sex therapist, relationship specialist once about her work, and she told me that sex therapy oftentimes unpacks a lot of undiagnosed or misdiagnosed behavioral health issues, and she said specifically ADHD. Yeah. The lack of attention and presence in a relationship, where the husband desperately wants to give that to his spouse, but just can't bring it to the table sometimes. They'll test for ADHD and they'll be put on something to help with that, and a lot of times that can fix it. So I think we can tease this stuff out in a lot of different ways.
Okay, so let's go back to you, Ben.
Yeah.
Here we are. Let's call it mid-20s, grad school, right?
Yeah.
So grad school, you had talked about knowing when the problem persisted to the point of this is an issue, this is a concern. I know it. My wife knows it. Now, what happened in regards to saying I need to do something about this,
sure.
i.e. help, i.e. treatment?
Yep.
When did that click for you, and what did that look like?
Yeah, I think I can I'll try to paint the picture. My wife had asked me. It was at the end of a night. We had some friends over for dinner. She had asked me how much I drank that day, and I gave her the
lie.
Patented 2 or 3 beers. I had an old Duels can. That I would top off with strong beer down in the basement, to make it look like I was drinking old Duels.
And at this point, would you say your use was 90% alcohol, 100% alcohol, some substances?
It was primarily alcohol. I was smoking pot when I could get my hands on it.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And I will also say that I never bought prescription medication off the street, but I always accelerated the consumption of it. So if I had been given enough painkiller to last 2 weeks, I would hammer through it in a week. I'd be back to the doctor trying to get more. And been given, a strong dose of aspirin or something. But what's interesting is never did I say to myself, I need to get more because I'm going to get high. It was, I need more because I need it for the pain.
Yeah.
That's the mind trick. And I think a lot of people opiate addiction, I think that's the trick it plays on you.
I was going to ask a hypothetical question, right? So the transition from alcohol and opiates, let's call it from the 80s, 90s, you know, quote unquote, growing up or escalating through adulthood, you know, today into the 2020s, right? Would you say with some level of certainty that if you were born 20 years later, would you maybe say that I undoubtedly, or my let's call it relevance of opiates would be a part of your addiction story? Do you think?
I think so. I think that as taking these substances got to be easier, I probably would have had, there would have been less stigmatism with it. There would have been a higher level of accessibility with it. And I probably would have rationalized why I needed it.
Makes sense.
It's been a long time since I've been at a party. I mean, I don't know if like kids go to parties now and instead of, you know, drinking beer, they're trading pills. I don't know what that looks like. I can't imagine.
Heard all the above.
You know, I can't imagine being real social, strung out on Oxycontin at a party. But, you know, I also wasn't real social smoking pot and had a lot of fun, had a lot of fun watching Ren and Stimpy, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think absolutely. A lot of my use came down to accessibility and also just stereotype.
Makes sense.
You know, I didn't run with people that use cocaine, but if I could get my hands on cocaine and not be the only guy doing it, yeah, why not? You know, I got caught in a lie by my wife, and I remember thinking to myself, I really don't care anymore. You know, I'm not even going to try to hide the lie. I'm not going to try to get out in front of the lie. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking...
Don't care anymore about your use, or don't care anymore about your marriage?
I don't care anymore about the marriage. You know, it kind of felt like things aren't lining up anymore. Like, her priorities are different than mine. And, you know, I think I'd be better off if I got an apartment downtown Duluth. I could go to my favorite watering holes without her getting on my case. I could be super dad on the weekend. I could be the kind of guy that I wanted to be during the week and just, you know, not feel guilty. Could not feel guilty about it. And then I remember it was a Sunday morning, kind of playing with that thought and thinking, that's the craziest freaking idea you've ever had in your life. And if you don't get your shit together, you're going to lose everything. And it wasn't my wife nagging me. She had certainly pointed things out to me. You know, John McDougall talks about significant observed behaviors, you know, her asking questions like, are you really okay with, you know, falling asleep on the kitchen floor with the front door of the house open? Like, are you okay with that? Because, you know, it doesn't seem like you'd be okay with that. So she was asking me questions that, you know, they were good questions. They're legitimate, but she wasn't ragging on me. But, yeah, and I didn't know what to do, but for some reason, like, I knew, well, I used to watch Imus in the morning, and he used to talk about getting sober at Hazelden. So I'm like, I'm going to call there. Like, that's what you do. Called them.
So you took it upon yourself.
Took it upon myself, and and I called, had an assessment, you know, everything lined up. Insurance is going to pay for it. We got a slot for you. You know, you just got to stay sober for 5 days. We'll check you in on Friday. I'm just
at this point. What was the response from your wife, your family, etc.? They said, "No shit. Well, we could see this coming."
Yeah, no, I think, you know, my wife felt a sense of relief and hope. But I think she also felt, because she grew up in a you know, she grew up in a family where there was a lot of alcohol use, you know, and so I think she thought, this can't be happening. You know, how could I marry into this? Because this is something that I didn't like about my childhood growing up, you know, was the fact that my dad drank and was unreliable. So I think she felt a sense of relief, but for the most part, everybody else really was kind of, you know, you get the reaction of people that they never saw it. They never saw it because I only drank at their house until 8 o'clock at night, and then we had to get home because we had a babysitter, and I'm finishing the job before I pass out. You know.
Did you crush some of those relationships? Were they broken, like in-laws, relationships with the rest of the group, friends, etc.? Or did you keep those relationships, was this hidden for all intents and purposes from, outside of your four walls of your marriage?
I think I certainly entering into recovery, I didn't hide that. Because I needed to stay sober a couple of days because it was going to be a couple of days until I was able to check in.
Yeah.
My friends really put me on a 24-hour, watch. They did not want me spending time by myself, simply because in my mind, I wanted to go on a 5-day bender, and in their mind, they were like, "You've been lucky to not hurt yourself or somebody else because of this reckless behavior. Like, we're going to make sure that you get to the front door of this place."
So you had these 5 days, right?
Had these 5 days.
Earlier, you had made mention about how your brain in the shower would go to fascinating about alcohol, etc.
Yeah.
Was this escalated even more during these 5 days?
Oh, I was miserable, and I wasn't miserable from withdrawals or DTs. I was miserable with the mind fuck of, okay, Guy's going to be here until 3, and then Scott's coming over at 4:15. How much drinking can I get done in that hour and 15 minutes? How can I manipulate the situation to my benefit? That's really, so there was a lot of that, but I will also say there was such an anticipation of relief. Like, finally, the crazy train's going to stop and things are going to get better. Like, finally, I have a shot at making things better. I remember that. And, I also was so concerned about this quote unquote working that, I had this belief that I could not show up to treatment with any substances in my system. I mean, my God, if you're to try that today, insurance won't pay for it,
True.
So I remember getting to treatment pissed off because guys are telling me how they were, finished their last drink sitting on the curb of the admissions building. And I'm like, if I would have known that, I would have been hammering them all the way down from Duluth. So yeah, I had a lot of good friends that wanted to see me get help. And I had a lot of friends wrap themselves around me that first year of recovery, not doing the work of my recovery, but just supporting me, coming to open meetings because they were interested in what is this whole thing? Like, what is it? A good friend of mine.
Still friends today?
Still friends today. I've got friends that I call on my sobriety birthday and I thank them for their support. I've got friends that have come to, driven down to medallion ceremonies with me because they've wanted to be part of it.
That's awesome, Ben.
Yeah, and it's been fun to celebrate that, and it's been fun to see that the dynamics of our relationship hasn't changed. I think for the first couple of months, people really didn't know how to act or react around me, and it was just giving people permission to say, hey, part of my recovery is actually talking about this. So, feel free to ask questions. If you're interested about something, ask a question. I'm not going to feel offended. If you want to drink around me. I'm not going to feel tempted, So I think
Did that change, though? Like from, let's call it out of treatment, 30 days out, 60 days out, 90 days out, tempted to drink versus maybe a year or 2 or 3. Would that look very different for you?
I think initially... My wife, well, first of all, all the alcohol in our house was gone. And I think not out of my request, but my family just didn't want to have it around, just kind of maybe out of respect is probably a strong word, but they didn't know. Families don't know. Families don't deal with this situation often. They don't know what's helpful, what's not helpful. I just was very disciplined in the spiritual fitness they talk about, doing the things that I need to do just to stay healthy. And
you're saying discipline, like keep up with it.
Keeping up with it. I think, for me, like if I'm going to, a Christmas party where there's going to be alcohol served, I already have 2 or 3 guys in mind that I'm going to call and check in with during the night. And I just do it. I just do it. I just call and say, hey, this is Benji from the Wednesday night meeting. I'm at a Christmas party. I'm making it a practice to call people and check in. So I'm just calling to check in. And we talk for 10 or 15 minutes. And then, an hour and a half later, I'm calling the next guy. Mm-hmm. So, I think it was being proactive to not get to the point where I was white knuckling it and feeling threatened and feeling scared. But I also was at a point in my life where, hey, I was married and I had 2 kids. There was a lot of stuff I should have been putting in my rearview mirror a long time ago. I wasn't going down to the bar every night. I wasn't doing a lot of the stuff that people that have 2 kids shouldn't be doing. Mm-hmm. Later on, I think I just was, my sponsor did a great job just training me to think through that first drink, think through the first use. And I never had an experience that ended well when I was drinking the last couple of years. Certainly nothing ended the way that I wanted it to. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was that practice of the minute that I entertained or romanticized the thought of a drink or a hit, like quote unquote, playing that tape forward. Yep. Really,
where are you going to go?
Yeah. How is this going to play out? And to be honest, it's not going to be a drink and walk away from it. And
you just knew that.
I just knew that. That's what that's, and I think that it says in the big book, like that is, that's the struggle. Every drinker wants to someday believe that they can drink like a normal person. In
moderation.
Yeah, drink like a normal person, Oh, I only had problem with wine. I think I'll drink beer. Oh, I know that there's a lot of people in recovery that I never had problems with marijuana. It was just primarily alcohol. Mm-hmm. Maybe they can handle that. Maybe it is working for them. But I'm just not willing to take the chance. I'm not willing to take the chance because, first of all, it's not that important to me. Mm-hmm. How many other illnesses, chronic diseases do people have where when given a choice that would allow them to be fully recovered, they would deny it? Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of those. There's a lot of people in the hospital that would gladly trade places with me in managing their chronic disease. Mm-hmm. So for me, getting high is not that important. And so I just have, I just don't entertain the thought, and I play the tape forward. Do I think my kids are going to never use or drink? No, but I tell them the later you try that, the later that you pick that stuff up, the less likely you are to have problems with it. The less likely you are to have problems with it. And I think there's predispositions to it. I think there's genetic issues that are in the mix. But I think also that age of first use is extremely important. And, my life would have looked a lot different, I think.
Okay, so you went to treatment one time?
Yeah, again, I was extremely lucky.
So let me ask you this. What do you believe is invariably different from an individual that may be recurring, right? We talk about the disease of addiction, chronic relapse, etc., right? That the one and done for Ben and the 25 and still going for another individual that maybe makes it 3 months, maybe makes it 6 months, and goes through this process of losing everything, hypothetically their job, etc., and then digs themselves out of a hole, and then does it again and again and again. We see that cycle for a lot of individuals, especially in our program. We see that all the time, where individuals go and they spike up to success, quote unquote success, whatever we want to deem success is, and then come back through treatment, etc. What do you believe just worked for you, Ben, for all intents and purposes?
I think for me, it was having the perfect balance of privilege and humility. I think that because I had, I had a stable home when I got out of treatment. First of all, I was able to actually go to treatment for a full 30 days. Mm-hmm. When I got out,
in your mind, didn't have to worry about finances, where you're going to go, what's next. I have to get a job.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. How can I pay attention if all I can get into is an outpatient program? Yeah. How can I pay attention if I'm worried about where am I going to sleep that night?
Yeah. Or is insurance going to cover my next day?
Or is insurance going to cover the next day? Well, what's the next surprise? So for me, it was first of all getting enough time where I could begin to build up some momentum. Mm-hmm. But then it was coming home to a house where my wife had a good job. I had a home. I wasn't digging out of court battles. I wasn't facing the humiliation of having to do supervised visits with my kids.
Okay. Wife supportive at this time? Or was there a level of resentment coming out of treatment?
No, she was very, very supportive. Very supportive. We're very lucky that we could go to a program where there was support for the family. Yeah. She was able to get her needs met as a spouse, and find support to just figure out what does this whole thing look like.
Would you tell families today, let's say they have a 22, 25-year-old son or daughter, right, and they're off to treatment and treatment is done or wrapping up, would you tell that family, by all means, be a part of a family therapy session, family conversations? Is that something you would advocate for?
All of the above. The family has way more influence than they know. They just don't know how to use it. And again, it's what you think as a parent is going to be helpful can be devastating, and what you think is going to be horrible actually can be helpful. And I've got friends that have dealt with kids their entire adolescence, and the decisions that they've had to make just break my heart. But they are like, this is what we've been taught, and this is how and we believe that this will bring results, and oftentimes it does. So yeah, getting that support, get family programs, family therapy, systems work. I think oftentimes with adolescents, they're just the weakest link in a dysfunctional system, and we put all our attention on the kid when he comes home from treatment, that everything's going to be better. And it's not, because there's a lot of other things broken. That person was just the least resilient. So again, the dysfunction is going to be evident in that adolescent, in that young child, and now all of a sudden they're bad because they're acting out again. So systems work is extremely important for everybody to look at what their part is in this and not single out the person that is the most visible in terms of how they're dealing with an unhealthy situation.
Gotcha.
So yeah, the family work is incredibly important, and I think the family getting the training that they need to help somebody find the help that's being offered is critical. So yeah, so for me it was supportive family. It was having housing, stable and comfortable housing. It was having somebody that believed in me, offering me a job. I'd been out of work for a while, kind of as a stay-at-home dad. It was a wife that brought me back in, kind of without reservation, and it was a desperation, the quote-unquote gift of desperation, that things could be different as long as I did my part. And so I think time in is critical. Programs that provide some structure for people for a long period of time is really important, like the work that you folks do, with residential, then outpatient with sober living and skills, and looking holistically at all of it.
We just want to give as many touch points as possible for one calendar year, that we're always there,
Yep.
no matter what. Like if the circle goes this way, we're here. If the circle goes this way, we're here. Non-judgment. Let's get you to the appropriate level of care that you need to be as fast as possible.
Yep.
We know we're always up against time, specifically with opiates too, right?
Yep.
I mean, every use could be, unfortunately, death, right?
So yeah.
I always say, like, there's going to be basically three ways we're going to see you. There's two that we like, and the last one not at all, right?
Right.
So there's the one that's going to be through, CPS. Number 2 is going to be through our court system, etc. Right, and then the last one's kind of your body bag. Right, and so it's a very unfortunate situation that we're dealing with in the country today. It's sad.
It is, and I think we are looking for a one size fits all solution, and it's incredibly complicated. It's a problem that is requires an interdisciplinary solution. In ways that you guys are looking at addressing, that the Northstar is addressing through all the different programming that's out there. And so, I really, probably the most important thing was having that community. And whereas a lot of people can create that within sober living, can create that through, different formats and venues. I just went headfirst into traditional 12-step recovery, went headfirst into making healthy connections with the faith community that I was a part of. And it was just looking to see how I can surround myself with as many people making good decisions as possible. This doesn't mean...
I think growing that organically is half the battle, though, too, Ben.
Oh, very much so.
Right? Just literally growing this network organically, reaching out for help. You had made mention about, whether it's the church, the spiritual journey, your different groups, your meetings that you go to, etc. Growing that network where it's, hi, my name is Ben. Very nice to meet you. And it's somebody's not necessarily getting paid to do the work, that they're literally doing it themselves too, I think is super important. That's just what I've noticed from the community. A
critical part for me was my wife. So I had, my wife was about 8 months pregnant when I went to treatment, and her doctor asked her, your husband hasn't been to the past couple of appointments. What's going on? And she just, was like, wow, here's what's going on. And she shared it. And her doctor said, you know what? My dad can help him. Here's my dad's phone number. Have Benji call him when he gets back.
Did you call him?
I called him, and he hooked me up with a guy that was, to this day, I still consider him my sponsor. And he just provided me help. He provided me support. He was the guy that said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer every one of your questions, but I'll help you figure out somebody that we can call who can...
To figure it out.
That can help
just being a resource.
Just to be a resource. And also...
I always say there's 2 different types of people in this world. Those that take advantage of their resources and those that don't. So good on you.
Yeah, and accountability too. I mean, being able to call me if he hadn't seen me at a meeting for a while. What's going on, man? Are you are you doing this or aren't you? And so there was that part of it too. And again, I think, so having the resources, having this privileged life that I had, but I also said having a certain balance of humility there, because I also think with some success, people can become somewhat grandiose and, well, I don't need that. I'm looking for white collar recovery. I don't like the way that these people look, smell, talk, breathe at these meetings. So, I want to find the country club meetings. Or they believe that they're just going to be different. And, my problem was whiskey. I'm just going to stick with the beer now. And so kind of having that grandiosity that rightfully comes with success sometimes. Incredibly successful people sometimes have an ego that doesn't allow them to be teachable. So it was
shit that's in the business world too without alcohol, I'll tell you that. That's for sure.
So it was gratefully I had enough humility where I was teachable. And really I was just fascinated by recovery, fascinated by brain science, poured myself into just really trying to understand what happened. Why did it happen? Try to get some of those questions answered, which ultimately kind of led me to a career in the field.
Let me ask you this. What did you learn, right? What did you learn, during treatment, okay? Those 30 days. What was like a light bulb moment, right? What if I could ask that. And then number 2, what exponentially did you learn from the moment of actually coming home? right? So what did you learn in treatment is like maybe a light bulb moment? Maybe it's I wanted this, or I was motivated, or I was inspired, or whatever that looked like. And then the back end. The back end of coming home, seeing your wife, seeing your children, and then taking it from there. Does that make sense, Ben?
Yeah, kind of. What I learned in treatment, it is exactly like Bill wrote in the book. It was somebody saying, this is a solution and here is your condition. And so through the groups that I attended, it was somebody explaining to me, the obsession followed by the craving. It's giving into the thought, and then my body just going on autopilot. That is ultimately what the problem is. But here's a way that you can live with that problem. Here's a way that you can kind of mitigate that problem. So yeah, it was like for me, in the big book, it talks about, the obsession being lifted. That happened somewhere when I was in treatment. And that is one of the biggest miracles in my life. And people that are listening and have experienced it understand it. And I just can't go back there. I hear people that struggle for years having that obsession lifted. And I just don't know if I would have been able to tolerate that, because again, just the white noise in my head. So it was the obsession being lifted through the education and experiential work given. I did a treatment. And then I think what the learning curve was at home was that the drinking was just a symptom of all this other bullshit that I've brought into my marriage. And just because I'm done drinking doesn't mean that I'm a healthy person, And a lot of my ongoing work has been just how do I be more comfortable with myself? How do I be the person at home that I am when I'm out of the home? I hear at meetings like this deal, meaning like 12-step recovery, is really hard to do at home. Yeah. It's easy to do in the grocery store. It's really hard to do with the people you love. So it's continuous work being the person to my wife and kids that my wife and kids see me being when we're out of the house, and I'm being kind and I'm being patient and I'm giving people my attention. How do I do that? How do I continue to do that at home? And it's balancing out what things do I need to seek professional help with? What things are mine to solve? Where does my footwork end and where do I hand it off to somebody else? So constantly kind of playing in that space, if you will.
That makes sense. As far as your children are concerned, have you had the quote unquote talk with them about, dad's in recovery, dad was an alcoholic. Have you sat down and have that talk?
Yeah, it wasn't like
I'm just curious how that's represented, because a lot of I have a feeling a lot of individuals that would listen to this today would say like, how do I have that conversation?
Right.
What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we've tried to be real open with sexuality, mental health, addiction, all these things. So it's not a quote unquote taboo issue. So I never sat down with my kids and said, "No, listen, here's what's going on."
Yeah.
But they have come to hear me speak. They know that I went to treatment. I talk a lot about my recovery. We've had people living with us that, have needed some help that I've met at meetings in one way, shape, or form.
Now, have you sponsored folks?
Sponsored folks, yep, and also just been early on, there was such a, like they write about in the big book, just this passion and this enthusiasm to try to clean all this stuff up. And once you start cleaning this stuff up, like that just builds more motivation to get out and help.
You said early on.
Early,
So let me ask you, and I'm not trying to push this
No,
down
yeah,
your throat,
yeah.
but do you still have that today, though?
I do, but I'm a lot
different way?
I'm probably less likely to bring somebody home and tell my wife, "Hey, this is Jason, and he doesn't have a place to stay tonight, so we're gonna just let him set up in the basement for a while." And 3 months later, Jason's still down in the basement, right?
Yeah.
I'm less likely to do something like that. But when I get a phone call from somebody that needs some help, like, I love that stuff. People think that they're inconveniencing me when they ask for help. But man, you get it. That's why you
All the
do
time.
it. That's the thing that we love. We don't love a business meeting where we're talking X's and O's and we're going through paint palettes to think about how are we going to build out the new men's center. Like, we love it when the family calls and just needs help figuring this whole thing out. Needs somebody to talk to. That's the stuff I love.
So do I, Ben. It's some of the most heartbreaking conversations and some of the most rewarding conversations you'll ever have. I got to tell you this story real quick. There was an individual that mom and dad have been calling me over and over again for, let's call it 2-3 weeks, right? 2-3 weeks. Just, son Johnny needs to get into treatment. He's struggling. We're trying everything. So we tried to expedite as fast as we possibly could into treatment. Said, Monday's the day. Mom and dad called me Sunday night and just said, we are so excited to get him in. I can't thank you enough for all of your work, your effort, your energy. And I said, it's not about me. It's about you. It's about your family. Let's get him back, blah, blah, blah. And that morning, they showed up and he was no longer with them, right? And so his day of going to treatment was his quote-unquote last use, right? And so he chose, how you had made mention about going to treatment and seeing those individuals having their one last beer, or their last maybe shot of Jack or whatever that looks like. This individual is having his last hurrah and never made it, and never made it to treatment. And so I just look at like how it's the little minuscule choices that individuals make, I think, in this space, that you talk about privilege and how fortunate and lucky. I mean, Ben, maybe it was the choice to not get behind the wheel one night. Maybe it was. I don't know if you ever drank and drove or drink and drove, right? But or the individuals that are picking up the needle, the one needle that maybe was used by somebody who had HIV or Hep C or whatever, right? These little choices that are made every single day by individuals in the throes of addiction, I believe are ultimately magnified, and they're magnified 10x for every choice that people make prior to seeking a life of recovery. And how we can help those individuals, like I always say, I feel like we're up against time. And time is just not on somebody's side in the throes of addiction. So I don't know if you'd agree with that or not, but it's what we see. It's what I see anyhow on this space, and it's super fragile.
Yeah,
I think it's the only way I can explain it.
You're absolutely right. And I think I would probably say I would take, I don't know if I'd use choice early on, because, people would say, well, you have the choice to pick up or not. And yeah, if you put a gun to my head, I'm not thinking about, I can hold off taking that drink. But the overpowering white noise, you just cave to it, and so you essentially lose choice. And so the work of recovery is giving choice back, and that's you asked earlier about my kids, that's the message I give them, is like, I want you to have as much choice as possible. You are going to open up way more opportunities by holding off on that first drink, on that first use, to later on in life. Just like you're going to have more options if you do better in school in terms of like GPA, grades, activities, those kinds of things. So give yourself the luxury of choice, right? And so I think that when people get that choice back, it can be remarkable, but it can also be like uncomfortable. I've seen countless times people go back to the familiarity of what's miserable because they are so uncomfortable in the unknown of like what's possible. You know, it's you know, I used to work with students a lot, and I'd see these young women go back to the deadbeat boyfriend because that was familiar and predictable, while they had opportunities to date people, you know, that were healthy.
Or maybe it would treat them better.
It would treat them better, you know, but it was just so uncomfortable for them. So while
Familiarity.
So we go back to what's familiar, even if it's miserable. So I think there's also acknowledging that piece, that as we do help people and give them that hand, you know, how well are we helping them embrace the new things? And again, that comes back down to time. It's really hard to help somebody embrace new things when they're only with you for 30 days. You said that you want to provide people access to you for at least a year.
For a year.
You know? So
it's a big commitment too, like whether it's families, clients, and or our payers, right? In order to be able to serve somebody from the most acute level need day one to, well, let's call it the most least acute, 365 days of continuous care, treatment, recovery, sober living environments, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as well as the mental health issues that may have been unresolved for an individual, for traumatic experiences, etc. And so, you know, we desperately want to try to, you know, provide this, let's call it unwavering continuum of care, that we're there kind of no matter what, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think what you provide, what we provide in this industry is, for the first time, a sense of, hey, we actually care. You know, I think for a lot of people, it's the first time they've had somebody listen to them. You know, I know that there's families that I'll meet with, and just all they're looking for is a little bit of my time.
Yep.
You know, they're not they're not looking for me to solve any problem. They just, you know, need someone to validate that, hey, this is a frustrating, maddening, crazy experience you're going through. And so to provide that place where people know that you're not gonna judge me, you're not going to ridicule me, you know, you're just gonna love me, and you're just gonna accept me, and you're just gonna help me, and you're just gonna help me figure this thing out. And you're not going to put me on hold for 45 minutes. You're not going to transfer me 9 times. You're not going to make me, or you're not going to treat me in such a way where I begin to say, I don't know what's going on. Nobody likes to feel like they don't know what's going on. You're just going to bring them in here and say, hey, let's figure this thing out together. That's huge. You know, I think there's peer-based recovery support out there that can provide that in certain ways. But it's also easy to get discouraged with that. It's easy to...
And why?
I think oftentimes there's some dysfunction in 12-step recovery. You know, you can always find something good at a meeting, but in my experience, there's just certain meetings that are more healthy than others. But, you know, a good sponsor is going to train you what to look for in a meeting. But I think, you know, there's a lot of unhealthy people in 12-step recovery that can end up capitalizing on people that are trying to figure this stuff out, you know. And so
very, very vulnerable population.
Vulnerable population. And it just gets back to, you know, are you working with a program that is, you know, true to the traditions? You know, there's certain things that are going to be reflected in healthy recovery. But I also think that there's people that are just so beaten down that tell themselves this isn't going to work. It's never worked before. Why is it going to work now? They're kind of looking for the shoe to drop, the self-fulfilling prophecy of failure, you know? And instead of trying to figure out how to make it work, they're going to get wrapped up in the kind of the woe is me. And I get it, man. I can fall into that myself, you know? And so I think having a Northstar where you can be the cheerleader for somebody when they need it, where, you know, you can try to help them connect with what's out there. That's extremely important. You know, I used to tell people, like, I will at the very least match your level of effort. You know, I will at the very least match your level of effort. But I also think that there's people out there that are like, they got to pick up the phone. They got to call me. I'm not doing anything for them unless they can figure out how to call, and I don't need to be that cavalier when I'm working with somebody. I'm more than comfortable to pick up the phone, call them, and just say, hey, how are you doing? You came to my mind today. I just wanted to check in. A lot of people don't get that attention. Minnesota Recovery Connection tells a story about their peer-based recovery support model where they give people X amount of outbound calls within a 3-month period or something. And there was some guy that had signed up for that, and the volunteers were doing the calling like they're trained to do, and they never got a hold of this guy until the very last phone call that they placed. And they said, well, just wanted to, we're just checking in. This is the last scheduled call with you. And he said, you know what? I got picked up on a probation violation. I've been in jail for a couple of weeks, and I got back, and your calls were the only messages that I received while I was gone, So that was meaningful to me. Small things like that. We can complicate it, but yeah, it's community. A relevant community is really important to people initially, and so I still am.
Agreed.
I'm still really well connected to those communities. I'm still very motivated to help people, but I'm not likely to just bring somebody back home with me before I talk to my wife.
Good question for you. As far as your employment opportunities in this space, what was your most favorite? I hate to use this word, job, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think. Boy, they've all been great, but my very first job was working with individuals that were looking to return to college after some period of recovery. So these weren't necessarily people that needed to get sober. These were people that for one decision or another decided to get sober, and now that they wanted to go to college, and they wanted to have a collegiate experience, but not necessarily like a Greek experience, if you were.
Do most colleges have this option or opportunity?
Well, when I started the program at the College of St. Scholastica in Duluth, it was one of 12 programs nationally.
Really?
And
I know Augsburg.
Augsburg was one of Augsburg was probably one of the first 3 programs. I think it was Augsburg, Texas Tech, and Rutgers were the kind of the founding members. But yeah, I think there's I would speculate that the last year I went to the Collegiate Recovery Conference, there were over 100 schools represented or looking to get into this space.
That's good.
And so, what it can look a lot of different ways, but for me, it was helping students that had developed that narrative that I can't go to college because of some of the choices that I made, to help them reframe that yes, you can go to college. Here's a place. I'm going to help you figure out how to make this happen. And once you get here, I'm going to provide you with a community of people that have had a similar experience. And so that work wasn't so much 12-step like traditional AA. It was interesting. That stuff was more like Al-Anon-based work. That was like, hey, what does a healthy relationship look like?
Got it.
What's a recovery issue versus a roommate issue?
So did this group live in like a sober house, their own dorm area, or what did that look like?
Yeah, so we were a hybrid model. What you find typically with collegiate recovery communities is you either have mandatory housing. If you're in the sober living, you're part of the collegiate recovery community, or there is no housing provided. You're just part of this collegiate recovery community that there's some formal programming with it. We had a hybrid model simply because of the amount of number of non-traditional students that we were attracting. So we were attracting some students from across the nation that were coming to St. Scholastica specifically because of this opportunity. And we had some sober living space set up for them. We also had individuals that were from Duluth. We had a great relationship with the drug and DWI court, whereas as people were graduating from that program, it was kind of a nice handoff to us in terms of like next steps for them, where they maybe already lived in town, they had a family, it didn't make sense for them to come to the dorm or in the apartment. So it was figuring out how do we build community? What are important conversations? What's the accountability model look like? What is our role versus what's the role of, what should they be doing themselves outside of here? What do we provide that's going to be valuable to them inside here? And we focused a lot on like, what does it mean to show up in a meaningful way? The accountability piece. You had an appointment scheduled with somebody today and you didn't show up. Why didn't you call? Certain, you get the deal. Just the whole thing of like, hey, if you're supposed to be someplace, you tell somebody if you can't be there, and having them go, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But thanks for sharing that employment opportunity. I mean, that sounds like just an incredible experience.
It was fun. It got me connected. That's where I began to build the network of getting to know people such as yourself. And that just transitioned to you and I spending some time together with Hazelden Publishing, looking more at the formal curriculum of this work, and then most recently kind of in a business development role, connecting programs and providers with higher levels of care here in Minnesota and across the nation.
No, I mean, it'd be a different topic of conversation, but we could go into what's messed up in the industry today, right? We could have 2 segments, I'm sure, just on insurance and what insurance looks like, which is crazy. I can't help but to think, Ben, after you shared, your story and what that looks like one of my major takeaways, and I hope that you don't look at this as a negative when I'm about to say this, as I just think like you had a wife that was willing to work with you. You had a family that was supportive. You had an opportunity to have a home, like when you came out of treatment, like you talked about privilege and humility, right? And I just look at those individuals that are going into treatment that have court over their head, maybe a DWI case, a child support case, all those different things that they're dealing with, CPS, losing their children, whatever. They have a disenfranchised significant other. Their family has written them off. They've maybe stolen. You can go on and on, right, for different issues or otherwise. And they're legitimately all alone and by themselves. And so I hear your story, and I just think of how awesome it is that you had this familiar group, like this familial package that is surrounding you with support, versus an individual that's coming out and now saying, now what? Right? And so I guess my question to you is, you're on this flip side of the coin, which is awesome. And you've taken advantage of that. And you've done amazing. And I'm so proud of you, not only as a friend, but a colleague. I can go on and on, Ben. I think the world of you. On the left-hand side, what can we do to help that individual? And we could support that individual and do a better job of that. What do you think we can do, not only in the industry, but just as people?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're right. When I went to treatment and got help, I just assumed everybody had that same experience. And it wasn't until I started working at St. Scholastica that I started to realize, that is not normal. And this was back, 14, 15 years ago. And a lot's changed since then. And good care is difficult to access. So yeah, the vast majority of people do not have the same advantages that I had. So, what can we do? I think, at one level you can vote, right? And I'm not here to endorse any certain party. I'm just saying, I think it's something to consider. It's something to ask about when people are running for some office. Like, hey, what's your stance on this? What do you propose? What's your view of solving this problem? We know that criminalizing addiction, isn't necessarily the best way to handle the situation, right?
Go to any local courthouse and just sit through Washington County, Anoka County, Hennepin County, Ramsey County, and just sit there for the first maybe 2-3 hours. And tell me how many fifth-degree possessions that you hear.
Right.
One after another,
Yep.
after another, after another. And we're lucky if those individuals could be released to drug court.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And into treatment.
Yeah. So I think it's, in asking those questions, why is it so hard for a drug court to stay open? Why are they constantly having to petition for funding and, and it's, why is it a soft money program? We know it's successful. What are the politics behind formalizing that sort of care within our system? I think programs like this are incredibly important for people we all know what alcoholism and drug addiction looks like from the news. But have you really taken time to understand the medical condition behind it?
Educating yourself.
I mean, there's a great video out there called Pleasure Unwoven. It's kind of duckies and bunnies. It's kind of cheesy, but yet
another common man reference.
It does a great job of just explaining the science behind addiction in a way that's easy to understand. It kind of reframes the stereotypes that we might have about somebody. And I think it's just being willing to look at people with some compassion. I mean, I think the big book talks about looking at people that are spiritually sick with the same eyes we would somebody that's physically sick. People that are emotionally, spiritually sick. How do I look at them the same way I would if I knew that person had cancer? People are generally disinterested in mental health because they're scared of it. It's scary. We don't know something about it. People act weird.
Can I
People
give you an
act
example
different.
of that?
Please.
So Sunday we went to the farmer's market downtown St. Paul, and there was an individual that was sitting right by the bus stop, right? And there was a police officer 15, 20 feet away. And the bus pulled up, and all she did was just yell, I would say in tongues, at the bus. Right? I don't think anybody could infer a word that was coming out. But if you looked at the general group of the 50-foot, 70-foot, 100-foot radius, everybody was staring over there. And I would say, including myself, was a little bit like, what's next? Like, what's next here? And so I think that there was a level of scared, for all intents and purposes, whether it was my children, whether it was the 50-year-old that hasn't seen this, whether it was whatever, right? I mean, you saw what was going on right in front of your face, and I thought it was so commendable that this St. Paul police officer walked right over and again, untrained, probably has no idea what diagnosis that they're dealing with, et cetera, and basically lended a hand. And lended a help. I mean, where that went from there, I have no idea. But I just thought it was, in a world that we live in with police officers, et cetera, and what they're dealing with to walk into specifically mental health issues, that was a crazy situation right before our eyes. And, feet to the fire, see what's going to happen here. So, I hope that individual got the help that they needed. But I thought it was great that's what the option was, is to like open up your hand to say, let's try to get you some help. Right. And, where that went from there, like I said, I don't have the slightest idea, but scary situation could have been handled very different ways. Right. So back to your point.
Well, yeah. And we've heard about, and I haven't gone through the training. I'm interested. There's like a mental health first, or like I don't know what it's called, mental health CPR or mental health first aid, or it's a short course on just like, hey, first responder stuff. But
City of St. Paul is doing a great job with that, by the way.
That's awesome. And it's actually commendable, but it's also sad that burden has to fall on that department. The LA County Jail is the largest provider of behavioral health care services in California, or in the nation. It's a tough nut to crack, right? Finally, I just think just being able to have that conversation with other people and kids, like instead of being the person that makes the joke about the mentally ill person, or when we hear about tragedy and there's a mental health component, having the knee-jerk reaction that we should lock them all up. We should lock them up. They should have been in jail. Like just talking more so like about like would it mean to actually provide help? Like what would it look like to be able to identify people and provide accessible help. Getting help is not, 4 bus transfers and standing in line someplace for an appointment that you're not quite sure when you made and you're not quite sure if this is the person you need to talk to. If you're borderline schizophrenic, like that is, you'll never follow through. Accessibility, how do we make these things accessible for people? I think is another thing, but it's
would you like to get back into the addiction treatment space? And not saying that you ever left, like you're always around. I mean,
right.
Ben, you're as Minnesota is concerned, like you're damn near the common man Cole of addiction treatment in Minnesota. No, but in all reality, is this something that you do want to get back into?
I really, really miss daily interaction like this. CompuDyne, where I'm at right now, has given me the flexibility in trying to pursue working with organizations like Northstar. I mean, I believe if I can do something to make the clinician's time more effective, if I can remove the distractions that technology can bring into the office, I'm doing my part. I'll also say, like, I'm always up for a conversation because I think there's a lot of interesting work taking place right now in this space. And it's just exciting. We're at a point right now with a lot of this where we're going to start to see, technology and behavioral health overlap more and more.
We're seeing it right now, right? The pandemic has basically caused a lot of organizations like our own to transition from, let's call it, a fully face-to-face delivery model to maybe a hybrid approach where some of it's face-to-face, some of it's over telehealth, televideo, et cetera. In some cases, drastic cases, there's organizations, and we're a part of this, that it literally is the entire cycle of service delivery that is being presented, for all intents and purposes, over video, right? Whether it's my medication, whether it's my mental health, whether it's addiction treatment, behavioral health needs, etc. So from day one, that is how the relationship has been built, and that's how it will be continued to be evolve and develop through. So you're right on the money. Like, technology in behavioral health have always been, very different sides of the spectrum, right? And now they're being melded. And quite frankly, they were forced to meld through the pandemic. And so organizations like ours in this space, the providers in this space, have been forced to really ramp up telehealth procedures or processes in order to deliver service to as many individuals as you can. Double-edged sword to that. But, we're learning. We're only 5 months into this, and I think every other organization would say the same thing that hasn't done this for years, i.e. like a Dr. Friends. Dr. Friends has been around in Minnesota. I would say he's one of the addiction czars, in Minnesota. He's an incredibly intelligent man, and he, has been delivering telehealth for some time. And so I think he knows how to do this best, and there's some really good practices behind it. But I don't know how it's going to evolve as a whole for the addiction space. When you talk about connectivity, relationships, building a community, etc. So is that community going to be built via Facebook, Marco Polo, all these different apps and technology, and that's the communication strategy, and that's what people are comfortable with? Virtual NA meetings, HA meetings, AA meetings, right? Do people really cherish and find the face-to-face interaction the most important part, some cases in their recovery, or is it simply the content and or the time commitment that I have for it? So it'll be an interesting, I would say, next 6, 12, 18 months. I believe, and I know I've said this before, and I think it's sad, but I think we're going to have an addiction. I mean, we already have an addiction crisis in our country, but I think it is going to just skyrocket. And I'm terrified for families, providers, everybody in the space in order to meet the demand, because I think it's going to, when we come out of this, from isolation, you name it, I think it's going to be pretty intense. Yeah,
you said a lot that I agree with there. am really excited. I mean, I was excited about the overlap of technology and behavioral health care prior to the pandemic. I mean, I think you and I, working with the publishing group, quickly learned like that traditionally they've been late adopters with technology. And so there's been some resistance to it, but now that it's been, I don't want to say forced, but it's been the only way that they can continue to practice for the most part, it's changed that relationship a little bit. So I'm very excited to look at how can we, maybe not so much on the front end, but on the back end, how can we use that to extend that support for somebody in a meaningful way to create the capacity, like you said, as we begin to see a surge in addiction or individuals seeking out help for addiction, how can we create capacity for that within the treatment centers that we have, within the beds that we have, by reducing the amount of readmissions, and I think there's a certain amount, there are some ways that technology can be used. I think there's the evident ones with, Zoom type technology for meetings, but I think there's also a way where just, just behavior, like movement, like, as your phone begins to report location, where are the variances from normal? And, are we willing to let that information be collected if it meant that somebody would call out to me and say, hey, we've noticed that you really haven't been that active in the last couple of days. Just kind of curious, is everything okay? Do you need help with something, et cetera? So I think that of trying to figure out how can we give more meaningful help to people during that first year or two through technology, that's just something that really interests me. Also trying to find that happy place of privacy, but also just like, proactive data collection.
It's good stuff, buddy. Well, I know you got to run and got a lot going on today, but I thank you so much for your time, Ben. Appreciate everything that you do. I guess I got one last thing I just want to ask is, in your recovery journey, what's next for you? I mean, we talked about the employment, but in your recovery journey as a whole, what is next? Like, what's next for Ben?
I think the thing that is next for me is to really work on that part of my ego that creates a defensive and sarcastic response. And it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough that I notice it. And I've been curious about what is it? What part of me do I need to give attention, and what does it look like to kind of resolve whatever it is that causes me to snap at the people that I care about most. That's the place that I've been spending some time lately.
Yeah, but you good today?
Oh, I feel great today. I truly look at a lot of things as a gift. I can get down into pessimism pretty easily, but I have way more good days than bad days.
Choosing happy can be tough.
It can be really tough, and my wife, she's very good at that, and I tell her that, hey, if I knew where that switch was, where I could just flip it over, I would. It's been, the deal, raising kids, man. What do you people ask, what have you been up to? I say kids. If they don't get it, I don't even try to explain it because it's been
right on the money.
It's been a wonderful experience, and a lot of gratitude on a good, on a good day for me is one that I can look back and just really be grateful.
That's good, brother. Well, thank you again so much for the time, Benny. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I just want to say in closing, like, this is just a wonderful. putting together a podcast is more than just like turning on your phone, right?
Yep.
And so for Northstar to make the investment in the equipment, to give you the time and the latitude to explore this, and do it for noble reasons. This isn't some like hidden marketing pitch. This isn't a guerrilla marketing endeavor to like get people into Northstar. Like talking to you about this, like the nobility of it is probably a strong word, but that's really what it is. There's no there's no ulterior motive here. It's simply to have important conversations, try to bring some information to people, get them connected to some help. So.
At the end of the day, the only thing that I truly, really want is if this could hopefully help save somebody's life or, reduce time that they're, quote unquote sick, that's what this is all about. And if somebody would pick up the phone and say, I need help, that's half the battle, right? And so, hopefully that this will help individuals be able to do that and feel free to do so.
Well, awesome. Keep doing good things, buddy.
All right, thanks. I appreciate it, Benny.